Hello friends, today we have got a doozy. I'm just a man with a saw and a pocket full of dreams. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really averagely.
And engage in purely cooperation.
It's the big epic suit of armor that you face when you get to Lothric Castle. I mean, you know who it is because you've seen the title of the video. Obviously, it's Dragonslayer Armour. So first things first, I'm going to want to prime him, and I'm going to prime him with some black. Cool. So here he is, nice and primed up. And what we're going to do is we're going to be doing some TMM on him, true metallic metal, which is kind of similar to non-metallic metal, but instead of using solid color acrylic grays, whites and blacks, we're going to be using metallic pigment paints. And I had a pretty wild idea last night while I was trying to sleep. I wanted like tiles like sort of breaking up from the ground and sort of flying up as if like this right foot has just come down, and he sort of like smashed these tiles and like a lightning bolts come out from the front and brought tiles up from the ground and up into the air. And I'm going to try and figure out how to do that. I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing, but I'm sure we'll figure it out as we go. Who knows? So to kickstart doing the armor, I'm gonna base it with some Iron Warriors and just do some dry brushing on it just to get us started, and then we can start building up some highlights and tones to it, etc. Now, I've dry brushed loads of metallics before to create these sort of effects, but I've never actively sought out like achieving proper correct TMM. I've watched a bunch of videos and read up on it and how it works and stuff, and I'll be interested to see how this goes. I think it seems to me that quite a lot of people either really prefer NMM or really prefer TMM. Can't say I'm either way on them, to be honest. I'm just trying to learn both techniques as I go to sort of maybe formulate how I prefer doing things. But as it stands at the moment, I'm no master painter. I kind of find this kind of method a bit more intuitive and easier for someone that's not been doing this for decades. I think it's a really good technique for beginners to take on as well, because dry brushing is quite a good basic technique to really get down and start developing how to paint armors well. TMM is probably a bit more of a accessible painting technique than NMM, but as with all things, you can do really advanced true metallic metals, as I've seen people do, and some effects that people are able to generate by doing this kind of thing is pretty outstanding. So hopefully I can emulate something that will bear some resemblance to good TMM painting, but there's only one way to find out, and that's by doing it. So could look terrible, could look great, who knows? The thing with all painting and learning how to do these kind of things, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just kind of doing it. I can always offer advice and just basically just tell you what I'm doing as I'm doing it, but really all I'm doing is I just make it up as I go along. Art is subjective, so you can really do what you want. It doesn't matter too much, just as long as you enjoy doing it and you're getting a lot of fun and you're getting a lot of enjoyment out of painting, then however you want to paint something and however you want to do something is the right way of doing it. Right, there's our first dry brushing coat of Iron Warriors done. There is a sort of kind of goldy, sort of subtle tone to this armor, so what I'm going to do is I'll just do like a really fine dry brush of some gold metallic over this. Not taking away from the overall colour, but just something to give a little bit of goldy tone to the model. Cool, and with this base layer, I'm just going to do a sort of wash of Nuln Oil to kind of settle in and bring this base coat down, so then we can add some beautiful highlights to it after. Okay, right, he's Nuln Oiled up. I'm just going to let him dry for a hot sec. So now we can move up a tone, and I'm just going to do some lead belcher, and I'm going to do the same kind of thing and just do another light dry brush. Bring up some tones a bit more again. Okay, so there we have our metallic-y dude. Now I'm going to move up and we're going to move into some brighter metallic tones, starting with some Ironbreaker. I'm basically just going to use this fine brush, and all parts that I think would generate the most highlight, I'm just going to start adding this thin layer of Ironbreaker on and just kind of start building up some brighter tones, basically like edge highlighting and building out a bit. All the kind of like little risen parts and areas like most outward facing, I'm just brightening up with this iron breaker. Hopefully we'll start adding some depth to this and hopefully it'll look pretty cool. Is it looking good? I don't know. Just keep on doing it and hopefully it'll look good in the end. Alrighty, there we go with our first set of highlights. You're looking pretty shiny now. So I'm going to move up into an even brighter metallic tone, which is going to be our Runefang Steel. I'm just going to use this to accentuate brighter highlights. And I'm going to hope by doing this, we'll get a really shiny boy. All I'm trying to do is just keep building on these highlights to bring it away from the darkest point. So it looks like we are generating that metallic shine. Now it's not as detailed as most, professional TMM techniques can be, but I do quite like how it's turning out. I do quite like the combination of different brightnesses and different shines in areas. I probably will carry on using TMM and seeing how I can further enhance it, but for now I think it's just doing a good job of making this armor look shiny and silvery, and even if it's not perfect, that's okay. Not everything's got to be perfect. It's the imperfections that we learn from. If it was perfect every time, you'd never learn anything. And it's the journey of doing something that makes it enjoyable, rather than just having a finished product. And that's how I like to approach these kinds of things. And mistakes are just opportunities to learn from. So now I'm just going to apply some white, and I'm going to mark that out at our brightest points on the model, and just go for some edge highlighting and accentuating the brightest points of highlight. The thing I want to do is just not overdo it, because we don't want to lose the metallic shine that we've got. I think doing little white pockets is really starting to bring out some shine to this fella, which is quite nice. I think it is starting to work. Right, there we are. There's our shiny Dragonslayer Armour. Pretty cool, pretty nice. So now what I think would be a good idea is take some black, taking it down to a wash, and I'll just start getting some more of these shadows back in. I'll just start building up this black wash in areas that I think will be darkest, that we've sort of lost a bit of the shadows whilst we've been building up the highlights. So it'll be good to sort of bring them back to help generate that contrast between the brightest metallic and the darkest one. And contrast is what adds the dynamism and interest to, well, any kind of artwork, to be honest. Without contrast, it will leave it looking flat and a bit dull. Right, now this is going to absolutely kill one of my brushes, but I do want to give it a go because I haven't used it in a long time. And it's this chrome mirror acrylic paint. It is a very, very, very reflective metal chrome paint, and I really want to see how it will look as an edge highlight, just over parts where I have some of the white. I'll sort of stipple it around the center as well. Make that center a bit reflective, you know? Oopsie. Cool. Yeah, I like that little addition of added shimmer and shine with that chrome paint. Now we've just got to do the little touches of red, which include the sort of ponytail thing coming out of the helmet. So I'm just going to use this Mephiston red. And there are also some little red material wraps on the greataxe. I'm just going to target that red acrylic with some red contrast just to build up the colour a bit, darken it down, and get a bit of shadow going in on it. I'm just going to go back to my Mephiston red and just add in some highlights on top of this contrast. Cool. Right, now I think we can pop him to one side. Let's have a quick little look. A little Dragonslayer Armour. Woohoo! I'm going to stick him to one side, and now we're going to design a base. I had kind of like an idea last night where I kind of wanted a sort of stacked kind of square that I can kind of put some flagstones on the floor, sort of make it kind of like a ruiny kind of area like you sort of meet him on when you fight him. But I also want to make some flagstones on the base, but like where the front foot is, I want kind of like a lightning strike coming out, which I think could look quite cool. Where the flagstones are around his feet, it would be really cool if like I crack them and I sort of like make them sort of fly up as if the lightning's, you know, smashing them away from him. Now I have no idea how I'm going to achieve this, but I'm going to make it up as I go and try and figure it out along the way. To start with, I need the shape of the base, and I'm going to use some of this quite thin wood that I've got. Grab a saw and grab my good big boy knife, and I'm going to kind of map out a square. I'm going to kind of just make out a rough kind of incision, because I haven't got any professional woodworking tools, so I'm just going to kind of make do with what I got. And with that incision done, I can kind of just saw away at it. Here we have one piece. I want to stack it and get another layer on top. I'm just a man with a saw and a pocket full of dreams. We use what we got and we see what happens. Cool. Well, we hacked away at that. So now we've got 2 pieces of wood that we just need to tidy up a bit. So I'm gonna grab some sandpaper, give it a good old right, that's nice and smooth. It's not exactly straight, but you know, we'll get some flagstones put on it, so hopefully it should just look relatively normal, but who's to say? I'm gonna grab some of my wood glue. Cool. I'm just gonna let that dry, and I'm gonna do the old Blue Peter maneuver, and here's one I prepared earlier. Next up, we need to take some foam. Bang. This is just your standard XPS crafting foam. Now I don't have a hot wire foam cutter, which is sad, but you know, we can make do and just use the Stanley knife again. Just make thin incisions. Right, so I've got this nice little square. And from this, I'm just gonna start cutting out some little flagstone shapes. I like them being relatively uneven, because it's quite uneven ground that you're sort of fighting on, and sort of flagstones are overlapping each other, so I'm not going for any kind of uniform size between them, as I want them relatively different. So the good thing with having a hot wire cutter is you can do this really quickly, can get them all the same size quite easily if you wanted, and at a good width and depth as well quite easily, which is something you can achieve with the knife. It just takes a little bit longer and it's a little bit trickier. It's not as easy to get thin cuts. And it's also a lot harder to get straight cuts as well. Just being super careful not to slice off a finger. Cool, so I have here a selection of different shapes and widths of flagstone cuts. And before I glue them down, I think it'd be a good idea to kind of generally map out where I want things to be, just so I know which ones to use and which ones to put back. See, out of all of the sort of painting and crafting and things, I find this kind of stuff the most fun, when you actually start like building things. So I think when I start giving myself a bit more time to do things, I think I'm going to start like building proper Dark Souls things, you know? Like not just painting the models, but actually like creating the scenery around them. If that's something you'd be interested in seeing more of, you know, let me know below, because it's something I definitely want to do more of. And if it's something that you guys want to see, then that'll be decided. So I quite like the different thicknesses of them as well, because it sort of makes it look really non-uniform and uneven. Gets a good like textured playing field, you know? So that's kind of how I've mapped it out. I sort of now want to think that if I have our guy standing, it's going to kind of be there. So it's sort of like this bottom right corner, I need to start leaving a few gaps and stuff. So I'm just going to mark out with my pencil, roughly about here, where his foot's going to be. So if his foot's going to be there, so roughly marked out where he's going to be standing on this base. So now if I just do like so it's going to be my sort of path of the lightning. Quite rudimentary, but sort of got the part where he's standing and some streaks where I want it to sort of come off and be cracking and flying around, etc. With that mapped out, I'm going to grab some PVA glue. Well, that's way too much PVA glue. Just going to spread this glue out over the base. Let's just start laying them down. I am going to put a bit more thought into where things are going to be going than I did when I was just kind of mapping it out. I'm going to aim to kind of put the thin flat ones on the markers where I've laid down where it's going to be standing. I think that's a good idea of mapping out where he's going to be, because otherwise it might struggle if it's on some very uneven ground to stand on. So I've left some gaps around where I want these sort of like cracks to start appearing from. So in order to start doing that, if I start grabbing some sort of like uneven kind of shapes that don't really represent flagstones, kind of like rocky looking ones. So we started to build up that kind of sort of split rock effect. Now what would be really cool if I can get this to work. I have no idea if it'll work. It's an idea that came to me last night. I bought some of this thin steel wire. What I'm kind of thinking my idea is going to be is sort of grab bits of rubble, kind of feed them through. Try and make it act as if they're being launched in the air. I have no idea if this is going to work or look good at all, but I've had this idea for a few hours and I ain't giving up on it now. Right, so there's kind of all the rocks coming out. That's quite a cool effect. I think the best thing to do will be to grab some super glue. Just get them glued in place so they don't start slipping up and down the wire. Okay, so what we want to do is we just want to let this all dry. Let's have him in position where he's going to be. I think that's quite cool. Quite a cool effect. So the PVA glue has dried. Whoop. So before I prime it, I'm going to use some of this Mod Podge, which will act as a sort of like sealant, just because foam tends to kind of crumble a bit. You can use sort of foam sealant stuff. Apparently Mod Podge works quite well, and basically when you prime the foam, it won't sort of crumble or fall apart, is the sort of basic idea behind it. So just going to coat all of this in the Mod Podge. There we go. That is our base Mod Podged. Mod Podged. Leave that to dry for between 20 and 30 minutes. Then I'm just gonna prime it black and then we'll be good to go with painting it up. Then we can get our magic Dragonslayer armor put on the base and then we can add some lightning effects and then we're good to call it done. Alrighty, so here we are. The base has been primed. Oh God, they feel relatively sturdy. They don't feel like they're gonna bend or break, which is good. What we need to do is paint our base. Get our wet palette back. I'm going to use some different greys, starting with the Mechanicus Standard Grey. Just get a general application of this grey all over. You know what? I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but so far I've just kind of followed what I thought was best, and it seems to kind of be working out. Next up, we're going to add some brown and green washing in. So, 2 different tones, green, brown. Basically just going to wash these different tones over, sort of bring a bit of extra texture and dynamism to these grey slabs, give them a bit of extra character rather than just having them blank monochrome, you know. And there's with our brown wash, starting to come alive already. So that needs to dry for a hot sec. Do the same thing, but it's going to be a green wash. It's looking like some real flagstones. So once the green and the brown have dried completely, we're going to go over it with a black wash. I'm now going to go over it with some black wash and just bring the tones down a bit, blend them together a bit better. And then with some kitchen cloth, dab up any excess that's building up a bit too much. I think that's starting to come together quite nicely. Now that we've got the greys, the brown washes, green washes, and the black wash applied, it's got a lot more depth to it now. Once it's dried, we can add the last highlights to it and then get to work on the lightning. So now that we have all of our washes dried, looking pretty tasty. So what we want to do, bring up some highlights, and we're going to be doing that with 2 dry paints, Dawnstone, Longbeard Grey, starting with the Dawnstone as it's the darker grey, and I'm just going to lightly dry brush on these brighter tones, just to kind of the edges, make them stand out a bit against the darker parts. Alrighty, there we go. 1 highlighted up base. I'm actually pretty chuffed with how that looks. I think it looks pretty near on accurate to the flooring where you meet the Dragonslayer Armour. I think that's pretty cool. So all I'm going to want to do is glue him on. Here we are. Pretty cool. So to attempt this lightning, I'm going to take some of my Corax White. And my kind of idea is from the foot outwards, just going to kind of paint some streaks, but basically just drawing out from the center of the foot. So there's my lightning coming out of the foot there. Looking pretty cool. So what I need to do now is grab my airbrush. So with my airbrush and some white ink, I'm just gonna start spraying on some white halos around the lightning strikes. Okay, there we are with our white halo blasting. Pretty cool. I'm going to attempt some of this fluorescent yellow ink. Okay, I've thinned down this ink quite a bit, so I'm going to try and use it as kind of like a wash glaze kind of thing, I think. That, I think, is looking pretty damn cool. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some white ink back in just to beef up the center point, make it like nice and sort of white hotty. In fact, I might just put some white ink directly in this, sort of mix it together a bit, just to sort of generate that contact point center, which would be a fair bit brighter than the rest. You know what? I'm pretty pleased with how that's come out. So, there we are. There is our Dragonslayer Armour with his explosive front foot breaking all the rocks in front of him with that sort of electric kind of kick. I really like how that's come out. Thinning down those inks, I think, is an absolute key point for that. It really gave more control to get a sort of smooth gradient from a stronger midpoint to the sort of blended, cooler, further away points. Yeah, you know, it works really nice. There we go. I'm just gonna have a quick tidy up around him because I've made a bit of a mess. But there we are. There is our electric lightning Dragonslayer Armour from Dark Souls 3. Complete, done, finito. And I'm pretty happy with that one all round. All that's left to do is to say thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've managed to take something away from it, whether it's kind of like to do with the airbrushing or the glow kind of effects or the lightning or even the chrome edge highlighting and the smashed flying rocks. All of these were relatively new to me. I've not done them before, and it was quite fun to sort of figure out as I went along, especially using the XPS foam and everything. I've really enjoyed putting this one together, and I hope you've enjoyed watching along with me. So thank you very much, and I'll see you all next week for some more Dark Souls model stuff. With some black. Oh. God, what did I break off of him? What did I break? Did I break anything? Whatever.